Ladies and gentlemen, hello and welcome back to the Weigh In Podcast. We are getting ready to go with the next episode of Meet the Fighters, this time introducing the 145-pound division of the UFC, that is the featherweights. Featherweight's going to be an interesting division heading into 2026, a very crowded and kind of controversial title picture, which of course we will get to in a little bit. But for now, without further ado, let's kick things off with the 15th ranked contender in this division, kicking it off with Uganda's David Onama. Onama is 14-3 in his MMA career with notable wins over Giga Chikadze, Jonathan Pierce, and Gabriel Benitez. He is the former KC Fighting Alliance amateur champion and was actually undefeated in his amateur career, a very impressive 11-0 before turning pro. He would win his first 8 professional MMA fights in his career, but would lose his UFC debut to Mason Jones back in 2021. Bounced back with 2 wins before a loss to Nate Landwehr, would then win his next 4 before his last outing against Steve Garcia. He is a very exciting guy to keep an eye on, though. He has won 3 performance bonuses in his UFC career, including a fight of the night and a loss to Nate Landwehr. Those performances, they were 3 in a 4-fight span. Unfortunately, like I said, did lose his final fight of 2025 to Steve Garcia, but still an exciting guy to keep an eye on. He is only 31 years old. Very good knockout power and pretty well rounded too, can submit you as well. So David Onama doesn't have a fight on the books at the moment for 2026, but will be an interesting up-and-comer to keep an eye on. Now we move to the 14th ranked contender, and this is a guy that has been hovering around the 10 to 15 range in the featherweight division for years, and that is Hawaii's Dan Ige, 50K. Now, a little bit of disclaimer on the state flag. Of course, normally for American fighters, I would put the American flag, but Hawaiians usually tend to represent Hawaii on their own and have the Hawaiian flag with them. And of course, it's a little bit of a, different state, a little bit of different culture out there, so I'm including the Hawaiian flag for the Hawaiian fighters. But now that that's out of the way, back to Dan Ige. He is 19-10 in his MMA career with notable wins over Sean Woodson, Andre Feely, Damon Jackson, and Edson Barboza. He is the former Destiny MMA amateur champion way back in the day. Went 7-2 in his amateur career before turning pro. 4 UFC performance bonuses as well. He got the nickname 50K, I believe, after his knockout of Gavin Tucker, or maybe it was before when he won it against Danny Henry. I don't exactly recall when he got his nickname, but either way, that knockout of Gavin Tucker was absolutely disgusting, by the way. Probably the best moment of Danny Ige's career. Go take a look if you haven't seen it. He did win 6 fights in a row in the UFC. He lost his UFC debut to Julio Arce before winning his next 6 before a main event loss to Calvin Kattar in the COVID-plagued 2020. Despite the 10 losses, he has never been finished in his MMA career. He is extremely durable. However, that will be put to the test in his next fight against Melquizael Costa on February 21st. Costa, a very dangerous and exciting up-and-comer, has not cracked the rankings yet, so you will not see him today. However, he is incredibly dangerous, and Dan Ige going to be looking to defend his spot in the rankings. I can't even remember the last time Dan Ige was unranked. It was before the pandemic, well before the pandemic. So it would be weird if he were to lose that, but trying to defend his spot in the top 15 in his first outing of 2026. Next, we move to a guy going in the opposite direction, skyrocketing towards the top, and that is Argentina's Kevin Vallejos. He is 17-1 in his career, a very impressive mark with notable wins over Giga Chikadze and Sungwoo Choi. Former Samurai Fight House bantamweight, featherweight, and lightweight champion, a triple champion in Samurai Fight House. That is so incredibly impressive and difficult to do. And he did defend that featherweight title 4 times as well. His only career loss was on the Contender Series to John Silva. However, he would win his next 6 in a row, which is his current streak. Vallejos is also only 24 years old, so he has a lot of room to improve and plenty of time to get better. And coming off a stoppage victory over Giga Chikadze, a knockout over Giga Chikadze nonetheless, is so impressive for him. Kevin Vallejos, I expect him to have a very big 2026. He's a guy that a lot of fans are extremely excited about. Personally, I kind of hope he gets a guy in the top 10, but I also hope they don't rush him too quick. With him being only 24, he has plenty of time, and I would not want to throw him against someone that's going to beat him up. I mean, even a loss at this age he can take, but you really want to be careful with these younger guys. You don't want to feed them to the sharks too quick. So, although he looks good, I wouldn't necessarily be upset if they gave him someone maybe just outside the rankings or even in the 15 to 10 range, but we'll see what they give him. Going into 2026, no matter what, I'm going to be excited about it, and he is definitely an important figure to keep an eye on in the coming year. Now, coming in at number 12, we have one of the legends of the sport from outside the UFC, widely regarded as the greatest fighter to ever compete in the Bellator promotion, and that is Patricio Pitbull. Patricio Freire, if you want to be picky, but better known throughout the community as Patricio Pitbull. Pitbull is 13, or I'm sorry, 13, 37 and 8 in his MMA career with notable wins, and it's a long list over Dan Ige, Adam Boric, AJ McKee Jr., that is, Juan Archuleta, Michael Chandler, Daniel Strauss 3 times. They actually fought 4. Strauss beat Pitbull, I believe it was their 3rd fight, and Pitbull would eventually go on to avenge it, but beat him 3 times, and Wilson Hayes as well. He is the former 3-time Bellator featherweight champion with 2 defenses in his first reign, an incredible 5 in his second, and 2 in his third. Would eventually vacate that title to sign with the UFC after Bellator was absorbed into the PFL. He was also the former Bellator lightweight champion as well. Took that strap right off of Michael Chandler back in 2019, an incredibly impressive win and a first round knockout, by the way. He also attempted to win a 3rd Bellator title at bantamweight against Sergio Pettis, but I'm assuming that weight cut was just too much for him and it drained him. He was unable to win that fight, lost by unanimous decision. But Pitbull is incredibly, and I mean incredibly well-rounded. In 37 fights, he has 13 wins by decision, 12 by submission, and 12 by KO TKO. You can't get much more balanced than that. And I mean, his fights in Bellator, you really just need to go back and watch them. He had some incredible matchups throughout his Bellator career. Got off to a bit of a rocky start with kind of a lackluster loss to Yair Rodriguez in his debut, but bounced back with a nice win over Dan Ige. Wasn't the most exciting thing in the world, but maybe UFC jitters just kind of got to him a little bit. And I cannot imagine that Pitbull is, going to stay down for too long. The only thing about him is he is already 38 years old and a lot of miles on the tank, so that's definitely something kind of working against Pitbull. Father Time is not on his side. However, still an important figure, a legend of the game, and someone that I'm excited to see compete in the new year. Coming in at number 11 is another longtime divisional stalwart and one of the most dangerous guys in the division, although he's been on a slide as of late, but that is CCO Josh Emmett. He is 19 and 6 in his MMA career with notable wins over Bryce Mitchell, Calvin Cater, Dan Ige, Shane Burgos, Michael Johnson, and Ricardo Lamas. And yes, this picture of him after he knocked out Bryce Mitchell is one of the coldest pictures I've ever seen in MMA. If you've never seen that fight, Josh Emmett literally knocked Bryce Mitchell out so hard that Mitchell basically had a seizure inside the octagon. It was so violent. One of the more violent finishes I've ever seen, in a one punch KO as well. He was the former West Coast FC lightweight champion and also challenged for interim UFC gold against Yair Rodriguez. That was back in 2022, I believe, if I remember right. 2023. I was close. February of 2023. He's also won 5 UFC performance bonuses as well. And like I said, against Bryce Mitchell, which you see right here, just nuclear knockout power. That left hook of Ricardo Lamas that put him on the map was disgusting. The overhand right knockout over Michael Johnson, just insane. Go watch some of the Josh Emmett knockouts. They are some of the most violent you will ever see. Unfortunately for him, he is 1-4 in his last 5, but losses to just the absolute best. They came against Yair Rodriguez, Ilia Topuria, Lerone Murphy, and Yusuf Salal. So definitely not losses to be ashamed of. And Emmett as well is up there in age, already 40 years old. So I can't see him sticking around for much longer. But he is still extremely dangerous when he's in there, can knock you out with one punch, and absolutely not a guy you want to see standing across the cage from you at any point. Now we crack the top 10 with a guy who's quickly becoming a fan favorite and one of the more exciting and eccentric guys in the division, and that is the Fighting Nerd's John Silva. Lord Silva's 16-3 in his MMA career with notable wins over Bryce Mitchell, Melsik Bagdasaryan, Drew Dober, Charles Jourdain, and Kevin Vallejos, which that Kevin Vallejos win has aged like a fine wine. He won 4 straight performance bonuses in his last 4 fights, actually, against Drew Dober, Melsik Bagdasaryan, Bryce Mitchell, and Diego Lopez. He has a very high level finishing ability. He has finished 15 of his 16 wins. That is just insanely impressive. Vallejos, by the way, the only person in John Silva's career to go the distance with him. Imagine that. Well, at least in a fight that John Silva won. He has lost 2 by decision, so my mistake on that. But in John Silva's wins, Kevin Vallejos is the only one he couldn't put away. He did have a 13-fight win streak in his MMA career before coming up short against Diego Lopez, but he's got a fight scheduled against Arnold Allen on January 24th, the first fight card of the year. That is UFC 324. And you're going to want to tune into that fight. That is going to be all action. It is never a dull moment when John Silva steps inside that octagon. A great chance for him to bounce back against one of the top 10 guys in the division. So, despite coming off the loss, John Silva is still extremely dangerous. I can't imagine that loss is going to get him down too much. He's going to come back wanting to put somebody away, and Arnold Allen is going to need to be on his game in that fight. Coming in at number 9, another long-time divisional centerpiece, and that is the former 2-time title challenger, Brian T. City Ortega. Ortega's 16-5 in his MMA career, a very impressive and strong notable wins list over Yair Rodriguez, Chan Sung Jung, Frankie Edgar, Cub Swanson, Renato Moicano, and Clay Guida. He is the former RFA featherweight champion. He won that title all the way back in 2014, vacated to come to the UFC. He challenged for the UFC featherweight title twice, first against Max Holloway in one of the most brutal beatdowns you'll ever see in a title fight, and against Alexander Volkanovski, where he had a little more success and nearly had Volkanovski out of there. However, ended up getting turned around and was brutally beat down until the fight was stopped. He was undefeated in his MMA career before losing to Max Holloway. He was 14-0 going into that title challenge, and has kind of had some rough results since. He is 2-5 in his last 7 fights after a 14-0 start. He is still incredibly exciting, though, with 7 UFC performance bonuses, and does have elite submission ability, which he showed off multiple times early in his UFC career. And his nickname T-City also comes from his signature triangle choke that stands for Triangle City, T-City. He is actually scheduled for a move up to lightweight against Renato Moicano. He has had some trouble making the featherweight limit as of late, and if you saw his last fight against Aljamain Sterling, honestly, he shouldn't have even been allowed to fight. He was hospitalized during his weight cut and looked like an absolute zombie when he finally weighed in. There is no world in which that fight should have gone through, but like a warrior, Ortega got in there, went the distance with Aljamain Sterling. Obviously lost, but I think a move up to lightweight is going to be good for him. He is kind of battling father time a little bit. He's already 34. So we'll see if a move to lightweight can kind of revitalize his title hopes. But as of now, he is ranked number 9 in the featherweight division. And it seems that his best days are probably behind him, but we'll see what he looks like at 155 pounds. Coming in at number 8 is a guy that is running rampant through the featherweight division. He has gone on one of the most impressive win streaks in the sport and somehow stayed pretty quiet and under the radar, and that is Steve Garcia, the Mean Machine. Garcia is 19-5 in his MMA career with notable wins over David Onama, Calvin Kattar, Kyle Nelson, Sungwoo Choi, Melquizael Costa, which that win has aged incredibly well, and a young Chase Hooper as well. He was the former Fresquez Productions bantamweight champion outside the UFC. When he got to the UFC, it was a little bit of mixed results as he lost 2 of his first 3 UFC fights and then has not lost since. That is 7 wins in a row, including 4 UFC performance bonuses. 15 of his 19 professional wins come by way of knockout, and he has won 6 of his 7 fights during his win streak by way of KO TKO as well. The only one going the distance with him being Calvin Kattar. Steve Garcia is one of the most vicious and threatening knockout artists in the division. And like I said, he's been really quietly working his way up. He's kind of just a guy that you look at and you don't really think much of. He's kind of just a, pasty, kind of unathletic looking guy. I mean, you could tell he works out. He kind of looks like a guy that visits the gym regularly but doesn't really take it too seriously. And then he goes in there and just murks people and puts them to sleep. It's crazy. Does not have a fight booked at the moment in 2026. However, he is one of the guys that I'm the most excited to see compete in 2026. I absolutely think he's going to be ready for a guy ranked above him, very likely even in the top 5. So we'll see what they give him whenever they make a fight, but I'm so excited for when Steve Garcia gets a fight on the books, and I really hope it's going to be soon. Now, coming in at number 7, another guy that is just steamrolling the featherweight top 15 at the moment, and that is Morocco's Youssef Zalal, the Moroccan Devil. Zalal is 18-5-1 in his MMA career, some good notable wins over Josh Emmett, Calvin Kattar, and Jack Shore. So Zalal's a little bit of an interesting case as he was actually signed to the UFC back in 2019, made his debut in 2020 right before the pandemic. Won his first 3 UFC fights, but then lost his next 3 and had a draw in the 4th. The losses coming against Ilya Topuria, Sung Woo Choi, and Sean Woodson, and then the draw against Damon Blackshear before he was ultimately cut by the UFC. He would win 3 more fights outside the UFC before being re-signed, and he has now won 5 in a row inside the UFC, 8 fights overall in all of MMA. And he has looked like a championship level fighter since he's been re-signed to the UFC. Absolutely ran through Josh Emmett in his last fight. It was an armbar about a minute and a half into the first round. Barely even broke a sweat. So Youssef Zalal is absolutely going to be a guy to keep an eye on as we head into 2026. And like I said, he's still pretty young. He is only 29 years old, has not even hit his 30th birthday yet. And like I said, a lot of people think he has championship potential. As you know, I'm not really one to personally crown that. I always think it's kind of early. However, he is already ranked number 7. He is at, I would almost guarantee that he's going to be inside the top 5 at some point. And it would not at least surprise me if he challenged for a featherweight title someday. Maybe wins one, who knows? But I think he's going to get a title shot at some point in the next few years. So the Moroccan Devil absolutely in for a big 2026. Can't wait to see what's next for him. Now we head to the number 6 contender, the final fighter ranked outside the top 5 at 145 pounds, and that is almighty Arnold Allen of England. Allen is 20-3 in his MMA career with notable wins over Giga Chikadze, Calvin Kattar, Dan Hooker, back when he was at featherweight, Sadiq Youssef, and Gilbert Melendez. He is the former Made for the Cage lightweight champion and the former East Coast Fight Factory amateur champion before turning professional. He began his UFC career with 10 straight wins, a very impressive win streak, before he was thrown in there with the former champion Max Holloway. He does have incredibly impressive technical striking. He is very tight and clean with his technique. Not exactly the most prolific finisher in the division. However, he can finish a fight when he really needs to. But he's going to need that finishing ability to come out in full force because he is scheduled to fight the incredibly impressive and dangerous John Silva on January 24th, as I mentioned earlier. Big fight for the division. Massive for determining the landscape of the title picture in 2026. And Arnold Allen has lost 2 fights inside the UFC to the absolute best against Holloway and Movsar Evloev. Bounced back with the win over Giga Chikadze, but John Silva, an oncoming force. And if Arnold Allen wants to stay inside that title picture and keep his title hopes alive going forward, the John Silva fight is a fight that he's probably going to need to win. And on the other side, John Silva coming off a loss to Diego Lopez, kind of a must win for him, too, for him to prove that he really is one of the elites of the featherweight division at present. So massive stakes on that fight. You're not going to want to miss it. Huge fight for the featherweight division between number 6 and number 10. Now we make our journey to the top 5. And we kick things off with a former UFC bantamweight champion, and that is the Funk Master Aljamain Sterling. Sterling is 25-5 and 30 MMA fights in his career, with a very impressive notable wins list over Brian Ortega, Calvin Kattar, Henry Cejudo, TJ Dillashaw, Piotr Jan, the current bantamweight champion twice, Corey Sandhagen, Pedro Munoz, Jimmy Rivera, Renan Barao, and Takeya Mizugaki. So just running down that list, Cejudo, former flyweight and bantamweight champion. Dillashaw, former two-time bantamweight champion. Piotr Jan, former two-time bantamweight champion. And Renan Barão, former bantamweight champion. So just incredible wins list for the Funk Master. He was in the conversation for the greatest bantamweight of all time before losing his belt to Sean O'Malley. Kind of seems like he's fallen out of that conversation now. Dominic Cruz and Merab Dvalishvili still seem to be the number one and number two, but Sterling absolutely up there, had an incredible career and still holding his own at 145 pounds as well. He was also the former Cage Fury UFC Bantamweight champion, had 3 defenses in that reign as well, similar to his UFC Bantamweight run. And also the former Ring of Combat Bantamweight champion, did not defend that belt at all, but either way, very impressive. He had a 9-fight win streak inside the UFC. His last loss came against, or before that, his last loss came against Marlon Moraes in 2017. He was knocked out viciously in the first round, then won 9 in a row before eventually losing his bantamweight title to Sean O'Malley. He has very high-level grappling and wrestling. That is what he's known for, but his striking has come along nicely as well. And if you can out-wrestle Henry Cejudo, that just speaks levels to how good your wrestling really is. Also, I know not many people think the grappling and the wrestling aspect of MMA is as entertaining, but if you want to see some really entertaining grappling and wrestling, go watch his fight with Movsar Evloev. It was very fun, a lot of great scrambles, a lot of reversals. One of the most fun grapple-heavy fights that I've ever seen. And Aljamain Sterling, one of the greatest bantamweights of all time, and I can't wait to see what's next for him in 2026. Now we move to the number 4 contender, and this was a guy that a lot of people thought maybe should have the next title shot at featherweight. It ultimately did go to somebody else. But this guy's still firmly in the title picture, and that is the undefeated Lerone Murphy, the Miracle of England. 17-0-1 in his MMA career, so 17 wins, no losses, and a draw. Notable wins over Aaron Pico, Josh Emmett, Dan Ige, and Edson Barbosa. That Aaron Pico win last year, a spinning back elbow where he knocked Pico out cold, in my opinion, was the knockout of the year last year. Kind of goes back and forth. A lot of people think, maybe you should go to Mauricio Rufy for his knockout over Bobby Green, but my pick is Lerone Murphy over Aaron Pico. Go watch that fight if you haven't seen it. He was the former full contact contender featherweight champion outside the UFC and also the former ICE FC amateur champion before turning professional. His only career blemish came all the way back in 2019, his UFC debut against Zubaira Tukhugov out of the Dagestan camp, Team Habib. Very close fight, obviously, with it being a split draw. And Murphy was actually an underdog for that fight, which looking back is pretty surprising, but has since won 9 in a row, including 3 UFC performance bonuses, and the capstone of that win streak so far was that disgusting elbow against Aaron Pico. Murphy has been calling for a title shot since then, disappointed that he didn't get it, but I would love to see him step in there with the title fight already booked, just to get one more statement win. And we'll get to who I would like to see him face in a little bit, but Lerone Murphy, undefeated at featherweight inside the top 5. Being undefeated in MMA is impressive enough. Being undefeated in the UFC, even more impressive, and being undefeated in the top 5 of a UFC division is nearly unheard of. So Lerone Murphy, his nickname very fitting. It's a miracle when you're undefeated in the top 5 of a UFC division, and I can't wait to see what he decides to do and what's next for him in the new year. Coming in at number 3 is another guy that has been at the top of this division for a long, long time, and that is El Pantera, Yair Rodriguez. He's 20-5 in his MMA career, notable wins over Patricio Pitbull, Josh Emmett, Brian Ortega, Jeremy Stevens, Chan Sung Jung, the Korean Zombie, BJ Penn, Andre Feely, and Dan Hooker. He is the former interim UFC featherweight champion. He contested for that title against Josh Emmett while Alexander Volkanovski was on vacation at lightweight. Would eventually unify the titles with Volkanovski, but did come up short in his bid for undisputed gold. He did win the Ultimate Fighter Latin America Season 1, and that tournament took place all the way back in 2014, beat Leonardo Morales in the finale. He would win, his first 6 UFC fights before running into Frankie Edgar, got absolutely smashed in that fight, but did come back with one of the most impressive performances you will ever see The latest knockout in UFC history, or at least it's tied. It was the final second of the final round. Yair Rodriguez ducked and threw a back elbow, kind of like an upwards elbow almost, and knocked out the Korean Zombie. That is a fight you have to go see. Won fight of the night and performance of the night that night as the UFC's 25th anniversary event. Just an incredible way to cap off that 25th year anniversary and really celebrate what the UFC had become with just one of the greatest knockouts you'll ever see. Go watch it. The whole fight was amazing, but to finish that way in one of the greatest fights you'll ever see, just incredible moment and probably the highlight of Yair's career so far. Throughout his entire career, he was shown off lightning fast and flashy striking, incredible kicks, very fast hands, and the kicks come from all angles. He is a very tough customer to deal with. And despite the fact that he's kind of lost to some of the best in this division, guys like Volkanovski, Holloway, Brian Ortega, and Frankie Edgar, he is still incredibly dangerous and never a guy that you want to see standing across the octagon from you. Not quite sure what's going to be next for him in 2026. He's kind of in a bit of a weird spot, but we'll see what's next for him. It'll probably be someone maybe just outside that top five, but either way, Yair Rodriguez, all action when he gets inside that cage. Can't wait to see him back. Now, coming in at number 2, we have a former title challenger and the next title challenger for the featherweight title, and that is Diego Lopes. Lopes quickly turning into one of the biggest fan favorites in the division. He is 27-7 in his MMA career, with notable wins over John Silva, Brian Ortega, Dan Ige, and Sadiq Youssef. He is the former Lux Fight League featherweight champion, defended that belt twice, former XFL featherweight champion, and Jasagi FL featherweight champion. Hopefully, I'm pronouncing that right. He did challenge for a UFC title against Alexander Volkanovski. The title was vacant at the time. Did come up short in that fight, lost a unanimous decision. However, still put up a good showing for himself, even dropped Volkanovski at one point, I believe, towards the end of the second round, if I'm not mistaken. His UFC debut was a short notice fight against Movsar Evloev, of all people, and he was a massive underdog going into that fight. He was a plus 600 underdog on the final odds and nearly won that fight. At the time, it just kind of seemed like it was a guy that caught Evloev off guard. But Diego Lopes has gone on to build a name for himself, and now I want to see them run that fight back someday. With both of them at the top of this division, I would absolutely love a rematch. He's won 5 in a row following that debut loss before running into Alexander Volkanovski in that title fight, but has also won 5 UFC performance bonuses as well. An incredibly exciting fighter, also competed at UFC 300 and had a phenomenal first round stoppage over Sadiq Youssef. As I mentioned, he is scheduled to get the next title shot against Alexander Volkanovski on January 31st. That is UFC 325 from Australia. Now, something about this title shot, it is a little controversial because he did lose to Volkanovski in Volkanovski's last fight. So it's kind of interesting that they're running it back right away. I mean, Lopes did get a nice win over John Silva. Another fight that if you haven't seen, go watch it. It was one of the greatest fights of 2025 and one of the greatest knockouts of 2025 as well. Another spinning back elbow. Kind of dominated the year, the spinning back elbows, but nevertheless. But when he lost to Volkanovski in the champ's last fight, and then you have Movsar Evloev and Lerone Murphy both right there who are undefeated, doesn't really make the most sense for Diego Lopes to get the next title shot. I mean, it is what it is. I mean, there's nothing you can do to change it now. And he's going to go in there against Volkanovski regardless. And he is a lot of fun, and he is a fan favorite, but you really want to see the guys that deserve it get it. And that win over John Silva, while impressive, considering he just lost to Volkanovski, it just doesn't really make a lot of sense. But nevertheless, Diego Lopes fighting for the UFC title again. We'll see if he can get it done to become the new featherweight champion on January 31st. Now, coming in at number 1 is the guy that Diego Lopes made his UFC debut against. It is the undefeated Dagestani Movsar Evloev. Evloev is 19-0 in his MMA career, has never lost a fight. Notable wins over Aljamain Sterling, Arnold Allen, Diego Lopes, Dan Ige, and Hakeem Dawodu. Not the most active guy in the division, but that notable wins list is incredibly impressive. He's the former M1 Global Bantamweight Champion back in Russia with 3 defenses, bumped up to featherweight upon entering the UFC. Another knock against him, despite his inactivity, he has also never won a UFC fight by finish. They have all been decisions, and 12 of his 19 career wins have been by decision. So you want to see Evloev kind of have that finishing instinct, and that might be a knock against him as to why he didn't get the title shot. However, he's still undefeated and the number one guy in the division with a win over the guy that's getting the title shot. Now, even if that win was a few years ago, I mean, that fight with Diego Lopez happened back in 2023. So Lopez is a different fighter than he was now. So is Evloev. But you still want to see a guy of this level get a title shot. And personally, I thought he should have been next. Even Volkanovski called him out to be next. But of course, Volkanovski is going to take whatever the UFC gives him. But what I would like to see, and this kind of ties it back into Lerone Murphy. I said I wanted to see Murphy against someone, and I would wait to discuss it. This is the fight I want to see. Undefeated Lerone Murphy versus undefeated Movsar Evloev. Both guys got snubbed for the title fight, so let's put them together and see who goes next after Diego Lopez. Whoever wins between Diego Lopez and Alexander Volkanovski, fight the winner of Movsar Evloev and Lerone Murphy. Please make that fight. Please make that fight. I would love to see it. Somebody's undefeated record's got to go. Let's find out who the real number one contender is. Let's match Evloev and Lerone Murphy up for a 5-round main event with a crowd, not in the UFC Apex. Put it in an arena, 5-round main event, or on a pay-per-view, do a 5-round co-main event with them. Who cares? Either way, make that fight 5 rounds. Somebody's undefeated record's got to go. Whoever wins gets the next title shot. Book it. But speaking of the next title shot, that brings us to the reigning, defending, undisputed featherweight champion of the world, one of the greatest featherweights of all time, if not the greatest. And his nickname is fitting. It is the great Alexander Volkanovski. Australia's Volkanovski is 27-4 in his illustrious MMA career, with notable wins over Diego Lopez, Yair Rodriguez, Max Holloway 3 times. 3 wins over Max Holloway. Let that sink in for a moment. Chan Sung Jung, Brian Ortega, the great Jose Aldo, and Chad Mendez. He's currently in his second reign as featherweight champion, defended the belt 5 times in his initial reign before losing to Ilia Topuria. After Ilia moved up to lightweight, the title was vacated. Volkanovski would win the vacant strap back. He won 6 different championships in his professional MMA career before signing with the UFC. Normally, I would list all of their professional championships here. Volkanovski just had too many. He has been great throughout his entire MMA career. He also moved up to lightweight to challenge Islam Makhachev for the lightweight title twice, and even had a 22-fight win streak going into that Islam Makhachev fight the first time around. And that would be the beginning of a little bit of an ugly run for Volkanovski. He was 25-1 heading into that Islam fight, would lose by decision in a very competitive fight. His next fight would be a win. He would unify the interim and undisputed titles against Yair Rodriguez. But then he would move back up to lightweight, get knocked out by Makhachev in the first round, and then upon coming back down to featherweight, was knocked out by Ilia Topuria in the second round. So Volkanovski went from winning 25 of his first 26 fights to losing 3 of his next 4, with 2 of those being vicious knockouts. Going up against Diego Lopez following that 4-fight run, a lot of people were worried, and they were worried about his chin, thinking maybe he couldn't take a punch anymore. That maybe Diego Lopez was going to run through him. But Volkanovski, despite getting dropped, recovered, showed the championship medal that he has, showed why he's one of the greatest of all time, and ended up winning back his featherweight title that he had lost to Topuria. So Volkanovski, the current featherweight champion, and is set to make the first defense of his new reign in a rematch against Diego Lopez on January 31st. That will be a headlining spot for Volkanovski in Australia, his home country. So a very exciting first defense for the great in his second reign. It'll be very interesting to see how he looks against Diego Lopez in a rematch, to see how he counters the adjustments that Lopez makes. But something that Volkanovski also does outside of fighting is a show called Cooking with Volk. He loves to eat. He loves to cook. Go check out his YouTube channel. It is phenomenal and great entertainment. Alexander Volkanovski, one of the most fun and humble personalities in the sport, one of the most likable guys you will ever meet, whether it's an athlete or just another human being. He is just an incredible ambassador for the sport. This is the kind of champion that you want at the face of your organization, and he just proves over and over and over again why he is one of the greatest to ever do it, and arguably the greatest featherweight of all time. So that's going to conclude our list for the top 15 and the champion of the featherweight division. I will see you guys in the next episode for the lightweight division, one of the more stacked divisions in the UFC. Can't wait to see you guys next time. Peace.